They thought pressure would break her, that if they just squeezed hard enough, she'd tap out, flinch, pass out, or at least panic. But Lieutenant Commander Isa Kerr didn't panic. Not when her throat closed. Not when the oxygen stopped. Not even when the man choking her realized she wasn't gasping. She was waiting. Because Navy SEALs don't just hold their breath to survive, they hold it to outlast. And when she finally moved, he surfaced gasping. She didn't. Now, before we show you what the command log recorded at exactly 48 seconds underwater, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, make sure you're subscribed with that bell icon turned on, and stay right here. Because this wasn't about holding her breath. It was about knowing exactly when to end the fight. The air inside the Naval Rehabilitation Annex had its own weight. Cooler than outside, filtered clean, but heavy, not with noise, with tension, the kind that came from bodies trying to prove they weren't broken yet. Recovery smelled like chlorine and metal polish, like ambition wrapped in bandages. Lieutenant Commander Isa Kerr moved through that air like she'd learned not to disturb it. Late 30s, uniform clean but stripped of combat tags, sleeves rolled halfway with regulation precision, clipboard in one hand, medical armband on the other, white with blue letters, limited exertion protocol, the only marker that said she wasn't here to lead missions anymore, just observe them. Nobody believed that. Not after her file made the rounds. SEAL, DevGru, Kandahar, classified injury report, pulmonary trauma from blast overpressure. She didn't talk about it. The scar tissue did. Across the gym, 2 recruits fumbled through resistance band drills under her watch. Isla didn't bark, didn't correct out loud, just marked their time, exhaled slow through her nose, controlled, and moved to the next station. That's when Corporal Trent Hollis made himself known. He stepped into her space the way people do when they think casual hides calculated. Late 20s, short phase, shoulders built for show. That smirk stitched into the corner of his mouth like he'd earned it somewhere he probably hadn't. "Ma'am," he said, stretching without needing to. "Heard you're here on breathing issues. Asthma, right?" He didn't wait. Didn't know SEALs came in inhaler models. Isla didn't flinch. She looked at his feet, not aligned. Then his grip, too tight on the resistance loop. She raised her clipboard, made a note, and moved on. Behind her, Hollis chuckled. "Guess it's true what they say. Rehab's just broken ghosts and paperwork." She stopped, turned halfway. Not enough to give him her full attention. "You're rolling your knees inward on every rep. That's where your fatigue is leaking, not your lungs. Your control." Then she walked. At the medical desk, Nurse Bramley was sorting oxygen tanks. She watched the exchange without lifting her eyes. "Fun fact," she called toward Hollis. She used to run breath hold drills for combat divers, the kind where they black out at 6 minutes and she's still holding. Hollis raised an eyebrow. "That true, Commander?" Isla didn't stop. "You'll find out soon enough." He smirked. Challenge accepted. He thought it was gamesmanship, maybe flirtation. But it wasn't a challenge. It was a warning, one he didn't hear or couldn't. The stopwatch around Isla's neck ticked down another rep cycle. Her breath, still even, still silent. And Hollis had just signed up for something he wouldn't understand until the moment it got dark and the air ran out. And she didn't. The next morning, sunlight bled through the skylights, catching chrome frames and mirrored walls. Music played low, rhythmic enough to steady breathing, quiet enough to hear the hum of air filtration vents. Everything smelled faintly of chlorine and metal polish. Lieutenant Commander Isa Kerr moved between stations with her clipboard, jotting silent notes, while recruits rotated through the hydro weight drills. Control was the expectation here. Breathing, posture, pace. Corporal Trent Hollis didn't do control. He arrived late, loud, towel slung over one shoulder, swagger of someone who still believed reputation could substitute for rank. The others had already started partner carries. Hollis cut in, grabbing a free resistance bar, locking eyes with Isla. "Morning, ma'am," he said, stretching. "Heard today's about balance and breath. Perfect combo, huh?" She didn't respond, just nodded toward the hydro bags waiting at the pool's edge. "Form teams of 2. You're short one, Corporal. Pair with me." The group went quiet. Hollis smirked. Lucky me. They stepped into formation. Isla's stance was exact. Feet shoulder width, knees aligned, hands loose but ready. Hollis mirrored her, mockingly exaggerating every move. Controlled lifts, she instructed. Half pace down, half pace up. Don't fight the water. Feel it. They began. For the first few reps, he played along. Then halfway through, he decided to make it a contest. Jerked the bar faster, splashing water onto her boots. She didn't react. He took it as permission. Careful, Commander, he said under his breath. Wouldn't want to trigger that inhaler mid-demo. A few recruits looked up. Quick glances, uncertain whether to laugh. None did. Isla adjusted her grip. The only thing triggering right now is your lack of control. Her voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. It landed like an instruction, not an insult. Hollis grinned. Guess we'll see about that. On the next repetition, he overstepped. His elbow brushed her ribs once, subtle enough to look as accidental, then again, harder. Isla pivoted slightly. But before she could reset, he lunged in, wrapping one arm loosely around her shoulders. Let me show you the proper posture, he said, locking his forearm just below her throat. Every muscle in the room froze. It wasn't tight, not yet, but the message was clear. A test, a humiliation. Isla's breathing didn't change. Her clipboard dropped to the mat with a soft thud. For a single second, her hand hovered near his wrist, not grabbing, not resisting, just measuring. Then she stepped forward, one small, clean shift of balance. His footing slipped on the wet tiles. The hold broke before anyone realized it had happened. She bent, picked up her clipboard, and resumed the drill like nothing had occurred. Maintain spacing, she said. Next rep begins in 3, 2. Hollis recovered, blinking, confused by the lack of reaction. The recruits followed her account instinctively, terrified to be caught staring. When the set ended, Isla didn't look at him. You're off rhythm, Corporal. Breath and control aren't the same thing. Learn the difference. He forced a smirk, but it didn't land this time. There was something unnerving about her quietness, like she'd just collected data on him. And she had. Every move, every word, logged behind that still expression. As the others moved to cool down, Hollis leaned on the bench, rubbing his wrist where her shift had unbalanced him. Guess the stories were true, he muttered. She's harder to break than she looks. From across the room, Isla called without turning. And easier to time than you think. The recruits exchanged glances, unsure whether it was coincidence or precision. Either way, Hollis didn't laugh this time. Something in the air had changed. The joke wasn't funny anymore. Near the hydration station, recruit first class Maya Chen refilled her bottle slowly, eyes tracking the entire exchange. She'd been Navy for 3 years, long enough to recognize when someone wasn't just observing, they were cataloging. Every insult Hollis threw, every boundary he tested, Isla marked it. Not with anger, with precision. Chen had seen instructors lose their temper before, seen them file reports, make threats, pull rank. But this was different. Isla wasn't reacting to Hollis. She was building something around him, something he couldn't see yet. Chen caught Isla's eye for just a second as she passed. No acknowledgement, no signal. Just that same steady gaze that made you realize you'd been measured, weighed, and filed away for later. Chen set her bottle down and made a mental note. When this finally breaks, she wanted to be nowhere near the splash zone. The medical annex sat in a quieter wing, separated from the gym by 2 corridors, and a shift in atmosphere. The walls here were matte, the lights dimmer, the silence different, less waiting for orders, more waiting for news. Lieutenant Commander Isa Kerr sat on the edge of the diagnostic bench, jacket unzipped, undershirt damp with residual sweat. Electrodes dotted her collarbone and ribs, small adhesive pads connected to the spirometry monitor beside her. Across the room, Dr. Owen Moran adjusted settings on the lung analyzer with deliberate slowness. Civilian contractor in his 50s, ex-Navy, calm but direct. He didn't ask small talk questions. He already knew who she was. Deep breath in, he said, not looking at her. Hold, 3, 2, now exhale slowly. She did. Steady, no wheeze, but the resistance was there, just behind the breastbone. The machine chirped, graphed, beeped. Marin scanned the readout. Down 4% since last week, he said, frowning. Not critical, but you're hovering closer to restriction range. Isla pulled the sensors off one by one. It'll bounce back. Marin didn't respond. He opened a drawer, pulled out her chart. You get triggered by cold air, chemical fumes, stress events. She slid off the table and rolled her shoulders. Stress isn't the problem. No? She met his eyes. People who cause it are. Marin gave a quiet snort. Not amusement, not approval. Just recognition. You running drills again? Observing them. That's not what your armband says. She said nothing. The silence settled. Then he leaned against the counter. You know, I read your file, he said. Kandahar blast. Collapsed lung. Didn't even let the corpsman knock you out. Isla nodded once. I stayed awake for the extraction, gave them coordinates, kept the team moving. You had less than 40% lung function and still held breath long enough to swim to the evac boat. That right? She paused. 38%. Marin scratched his chin. That's not physical, Commander. That's psychological discipline. Most people panic at 15 seconds. You used to train for 6 minutes. Isla leaned back against the counter, eyes distant now. We practice blackout drills in Coronado. Duct-taped masks. No air, no visuals. The trick isn't how long you hold. It's how quiet you get while you're doing it. She paused, and for a moment she wasn't in the medical annex anymore. She was back in Kandahar, pinned under 200 pounds of rubble, lung collapsed, ribs shattered. The corpsman had been screaming at her to stay still, to stop talking, to let them handle it. But the Taliban were still 50 meters out, and her team didn't know the route was compromised. So she'd keyed the radio with a broken hand and given grid coordinates through a punctured lung. Voice barely a whisper, but clear enough. 38% lung capacity. No morphine, just control. Her CO's voice had crackled back. Control isn't silence, Lawson, it's command. She'd stayed conscious through the whole medevac. Directed her own extraction. The medics later said most people black out from the pain. She'd looked at them like they'd missed the point entirely. Blacking out was a choice. And she'd chosen differently. Marin was watching her face now. You're thinking about Kandahar. I'm thinking, she said quietly, that some lessons don't expire. Marin folded her chart closed. You're good, Kerr, but you're not unbreakable. If someone tries the wrong move on you, especially in that pool, your chest won't just ache, it'll lock. She inhaled through her nose, shallow, measured. I'll stay vertical. Yeah, he said, soft. But don't forget, oxygen's not loyalty. It doesn't wait around forever. She turned toward the exit. Hey, he added, why do you still do this? You've got your clearance. Could have gone home 6 months ago. She looked at him. No anger, no story, just truth. Because not everyone learns from breathing. Some only learn from running out of it. Then she left. Back down the corridor, her boots struck tile in perfect tempo. Calm, controlled. Her lungs were tight, yes. But her mind? Unshakable. The mess hall that evening buzzed with its usual low din. Metal trays sliding over rails, boots clacking across linoleum. The occasional burst of laughter echoing off walls. Long benches filled with uniforms in varying shades of fatigue. Recovery was still the mission here, but ego ate just as often as protein. Lieutenant Commander Isa Kerr sat near the rear windows, tray untouched. A small stack of personnel files rested beside her elbow. Tomorrow's evaluation roster. She flipped pages slowly, one breath per name. It kept her timing even. From across the room came the unmistakable timbre of Corporal Trent Hollis. Evening, Commander, he called, lifting a bottle of electrolyte water in mock salute. Heard you're supervising the breath hold trials tomorrow. She didn't look up. Someone at his table, another Marine, probably a friend of convenience, leaned in. You volunteering? Hollis leaned back, loud enough for half the room to hear. Hell yeah. I figure if she can outbreathe me, I'll salute her on the spot. But if she blacks out first, she's off this base. A few scattered laughs. Not cruel, just contagious. Hollis grinned, eyes on her tray. Unless that asthma's got a waiver for drowning. The room quieted just slightly. Isla didn't speak. She reached for a pen, underlined one line in the top file, and flipped the page. At the far end of the table, Petty Officer Deacon Reed, quiet, broad-shouldered, scar on his chin from a diving bell malfunction, watched silently. He'd seen the pool roster that morning. Hollis's name wasn't on it then. Now it was. Reed approached her table after chow cleared out. "Commander," he said low, "you sure about this?" Isla didn't look up. "He signed the waiver. I know. But there's a difference between pushing a candidate and baiting a trap." "I didn't bait him." Reed raised an eyebrow. "No? I opened a pool. He chose to drown." She slid a document toward him, the updated endurance trial roster stamped and logged. Hollis was now candidate number 3. She tapped the field labeled Supervisor Isa Kerr, then the one marked Observer, Deacon Reed. Reed exhaled slowly. "You want me recording?" "I want you watching." He nodded. "We live streaming to command?" "Yes. Comms feed starts 5 minutes before the trial. Video auto logs. Pool lights will be at training dim. Full submersion visibility." Reed folded the paper once and tucked it into his sleeve. "Heart rate monitors? Active on all divers. Trigger alarm at sustained bradycardia below 42. He looked her over. The evenness of her tone. The stillness of her hands. "You think he's going to try something? He's not used to being under control," she said. "Especially not someone else's. Especially not yours." Isla stood. "That's why I'm not trying anything. I'm just waiting." Reed gave her a long look. "What happens if he makes contact?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she picked up the tray, carried it to the bin, and slid it in without a sound. When she turned back, her answer came in the same tone she'd used for drill commands. Flat, final. "Then I teach him what a controlled exhale can do to a man who mistakes pressure for power." That night, she checked the camera logs twice, synced the monitor frequencies, filed the waivers, secured the neck weight brackets. By morning, the pool would be set, and Hollis would be walking into a room where the only air he could count on was hers. The pool was quiet at night, the kind of quiet that seeped into walls and made every ripple feel like a breach of protocol. Blue LEDs lined the floor in a slow pulse, rhythm designed to keep nerves calm and pacing even. Lieutenant Commander Isa Kerr stood beside the starting blocks, black compression shirt tucked clean, stopwatch in hand, hair pinned back, sleeves rolled, breathing, as always, steady. She was the first one in. Hollis showed up with wet boots and a borrowed wetsuit that didn't quite zip all the way. He flexed his shoulders for show. 2 assistants followed behind him. Clipboard text from the Annex's exercise physiology lab. They were there to monitor pulse rates and pull the emergency rope if needed. "Evening, Commander," Hollis said, voice slick as chlorine. "Try not to fog the goggles when you pass out." She didn't respond, just turned and nodded to the text. "Standard submersion drill. No breath assist, no weights. Surface taps allowed. Stopwatch starts at full submersion. Exit only on signal or failure to maintain." Hollis raised an eyebrow. "Failure to maintain, huh? Sounds like medical talk for blacking out." Petty Officer Deacon Reed stood behind the glass, arms crossed, watching from the ops booth. His finger hovered near the comms panel, where vitals fed live from the biometric patches on both participants' suits. Isla stepped to the edge of the pool, adjusted her mask, lowered herself into the water with no splash. Hollis cannonballed in beside her, laughing as he surfaced. "Ready to hold your breath, Commander?" She didn't answer, just dipped under. One clean motion, calm, controlled. Hollis waited a beat, then submerged after her. Underwater, everything muted. Blue shadows stretched across tiled bottom. The silence was immediate, pressing. They floated 6 feet apart. Ela had already shifted into what Reed would later recognize on the vitals log as pre-collapse mode. Heart rate slowed, diaphragm still, oxygen draw minimized. Hollis, by contrast, was fighting it. His legs kicked every few seconds, trying to stay perfectly level. He kept glancing sideways, trying to measure her stillness. He didn't understand what he was seeing. At second 26, he moved closer. At 31, closer still. At 36 seconds, without warning, he lunged forward. His hand locked around Isla's throat from behind. From the control booth, an alert chimed. Motion spike. Reed flinched forward in his seat. The assistants hesitated poolside, unsure if this was still drill protocol. Underwater, Hollis squeezed. He expected resistance, a scramble, bubbles, a struggle to surface. Instead, nothing. Isla didn't flinch. Her eyes locked ahead, lips pressed, breath retained. No air escaped, no panic. Instead, she went stiller. Her heart rate dropped another 4 beats. Her lungs didn't move. Her eyes tracked only one thing, his hand. He squeezed again, harder. She let him. At 44 seconds, something changed. Hollis's eyes darted, not with control, but confusion. She was still conscious, still calm, still present. And then she moved. Her left hand snapped up, wrapped around his wrist, her foot planted against the pool bottom. In one torque, she rotated her body outward, dragging his arm into a lock that twisted bone against muscle. The pop was muted, but distinct. Reed winced behind the glass. That's a dislocation. Isla spun clean, let go, and surfaced in one motion. Hollis thrashed up half a second later, coughing, clutching his arm, sputtering. She was already at the ladder, climbing out. Water sliding clean off her sleeves. Her breathing, still measured. No rasp, no panic. The assistants rushed toward Hollis as he slumped over the edge, groaning in confusion. Isla stood beside the control board, mask off. She glanced toward Reed behind the glass. He gave her a slow nod. No words, no victory speech, just the sound of her breath, steady, even, unbroken, as the one who had panicked sank behind her. Water dripped from Corporal Trent Hollis's elbow as he sat slouched against the far wall of the pool deck, one arm curled to his chest, the other braced behind him. His face was pale, streaked with chlorinated water and disbelief. Every few seconds, he flexed his fingers like he still couldn't figure out why they weren't responding the way they were supposed to. Lieutenant Commander Isa Kerr stood a few feet away, towel slung over one shoulder, compression shirt clinging to her back. Her eyes were dry. Her breathing, audible now in the post-drill silence, was slow, deliberate, measured, not even the faintest wheeze. One of the assistants knelt beside Hollis. "Sir, we're going to need to assess the joint. That wrist might be—" "She broke it," Hollis muttered. "She snapped it underwater." "Commander?" the second assistant asked, turning toward Ayla. She spoke without looking at them. He applied a chokehold in a no-contact exercise. I responded with joint manipulation, not force. Check the camera log. "You initiated contact," Hollis said sharply. "You used me to prove a point." She turned her head, just slightly. "The point was already proven. You just didn't see it coming." A door opened behind them. Petty Officer Deacon Reed entered, carrying a printout from the control booth and a med kit. Vitals recorded everything. She didn't cross anaerobic threshold, held her breath the entire time. Hollis blinked. "That wasn't training, that was instruction," Isla said calmly. "You grabbed someone who teaches controlled hypoxia to operators who hang off helicopters for a living. You thought this was a game. I treated it like a test." Reed crouched beside Hollis, checking his pulse, then unrolling a flexible brace for the wrist. Pulses spiked, pupils dilated. "You're in adrenaline crash." "I'm filing an incident," Hollis said through his teeth. "You'll need a working wrist to do it," Isla replied. Reed tried not to smile. "Poolcom's feed's been backing up to command since 2100. That includes underwater visuals. We've got everything." The assistant stepped back. No one said anything more. Isla walked to the far side of the deck and began stripping off her gear. Methodical, even. She laid her towel flat, placed the mask at its center, and folded the strap once before placing it on top. Her movements were cleaner than most salutes. "Commander," Reed said after a moment, stepping toward her, "Vitals log shows your heart rate dipped to 42 at peak pressure." She glanced at him. And? You didn't even cross into stress zone. She tightened her wrist strap and exhaled once through her nose. He thought I'd fight back, that I'd panic. Reed nodded slowly. Instead, I let him run out of options. She turned to the assistants. Secure the pool. Flag the drill file under escalation protocol. Tomorrow's training is suspended until command reviews the footage. They nodded, still in silent awe. Hollis sat unmoving, eyes fixed on the tile grout near his boots. He still hadn't stood. Hila didn't offer him a hand. She walked past Reed on her way out. Keep a copy of the log. He'll claim it didn't happen like this. Reed gave a short nod. I already filed the backup. As she stepped into the hallway, the only sound that followed her was the gentle click of her boots and the steady, precise breath of someone who had never once lost control. Command Room 4 wasn't built for theatrics. No flags, no rank banners, just concrete walls, matte paint, and a rectangular table surrounded by regulation chairs. A digital monitor hummed quietly on one end. Its screen paused on a time-stamped frame. Two figures suspended underwater, one unmoving, the other reaching. Captain Elijah Harlan, base operations lead, stood at the head reviewing a printed log. Silver-haired, sharp-jawed, not a man given to interruptions. To his left sat Lieutenant Commander Isa Kerr, posture straight, uniform crisp, medical armband, still visible but untouched. Across from her, Corporal Trent Hollis nursed his braced wrist, bandaged, wrapped, and cradled in a sling. The tension in his jaw pulsed visibly with every swallow. Petty Officer Deacon Reed stood behind Isla's chair, silent witness. Captain Harlan clicked the playback. The room filled with bubbles, muffled microphone echoes, and heart monitor data. It played in silence for exactly 49 seconds. Then the lunge, the choke, the counter, the pop. The silence afterward wasn't awkward. It was surgical. Harlan looked up. Corporal Hollis, is that you initiating contact? She was provoking me, Hollis said quickly. She baited that reaction. You saw it. She didn't respond to anything during the drills. She wanted me to snap. Harlan tilted his head. So, you believe a superior officer remaining calm during protocol is provocation? She knew what she was doing. And you didn't? Hollis paused. His jaw worked twice before he said, I thought it was a drill. It was. Reed stepped forward now. Sir, the biometric logs show no spike in the commander's vitals. She remained within operational breath hold parameters throughout. No sign of stress-induced panic. And Corporal Hollis? Sharp spike at 36 seconds, initiated the choke at 44 seconds. Wrist was dislocated at 48. He broke protocol at 3 levels: proximity, contact, and obstruction. Harlan turned back to Isla. Why didn't you surface or call for assistance? Because I didn't need to, she answered plainly. You were under pressure. I've been under worse. Hollis laughed under his breath. She let me attack her just to prove a point. Isla looked at him. I didn't let you. I measured you. That landed harder than anything else had. Harlan closed the folder. Corporal Hollis, you are hereby removed from the candidate evaluation track. Effective immediately, you're reassigned to administrative duty pending further review. You will not return to the rehabilitation floor, nor initiate contact with Commander Kerr. Hollis stiffened. You can't. I can. And I just did. Then to Isla. You could have filed formal assault charges. She nodded once. Didn't need to. Why not? She glanced at the screen. Because the air always tells the truth, and he ran out of it before I did. Reed gave the barest of smirks. Harlan tapped a note into his tablet. This review will be submitted to Central Command with the recording attached. Commander Kerr, your conduct met and exceeded protocol. Your restraint under threat is noted and will be documented accordingly. Isla nodded. Thank you, sir. Harlan stood. Meeting adjourned. As chairs shifted and the monitor powered down, Hollis stayed seated, eyes fixed on the floor. The sling now felt heavier on his arm. Isla walked past him, pausing only long enough to say, without venom, it's not your throat you lost the fight with, It's your timing. She didn't wait for a response. By the time Hollis looked up again, she was already gone. Breath steady, control intact, and legacy secured. The next morning, the rehab gym buzzed the way it always did. Clanking resistance rigs, muted instructions over speakers, the occasional shuffle of boots on padded flooring. But something was different. It wasn't the temperature or the schedule, it was the air. Quieter, more alert. A shift that wasn't spoken about but carried in the posture of those training. When Lieutenant Commander Isa Kerr walked in, no heads turned, but nearly everyone adjusted. Shoulders pulled back, back straighter, straps cinched with a little more care. No one dared call attention to it, but they all knew. She made no announcement, no smirk, no victory lap, just moved with that same exact gait, measured, silent, surgical, clipboard in hand, stopwatch hanging by her thumb. A few yards away, two Navy recruits whispered near the treadmill rack. "That's her," one said under his breath. "The one who didn't even flinch." "Held her breath through a choke," the other replied. "Didn't break, didn't blink." "She didn't win the fight," the first added. "She let him lose it." Over by the stair circuit, Petty Officer Deacon Reed passed by holding a folded report, eyes catching hers just briefly. "Guess calm really is your superpower," he murmured. Isla arched an eyebrow. "Not calm," she corrected softly. "Calculation." And that was all she said. She took her post near the pool deck, watching a recruit correct his squat angle. She didn't raise her voice, just tilted her head slightly, and he shifted his footing immediately. By then, the whisper had already made its way around the gym. She didn't teach them how to fight. She taught them how to stay conscious. Not a single person laughed that morning. And somewhere far across the compound, Corporal Trent Hollis sat at an admin desk, typing with one hand. Would you have panicked if someone grabbed you by the throat underwater? Or could you stay calm long enough to let control win the fight? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. If this story reminded you that real strength doesn't come from shouting, but from breathing, then hit that like button. Subscribe with the bell icon turned on so you never miss a mission like this. And share this story with someone who thinks silence means surrender, because we're back here tomorrow, same time, same place, and your next mission is already appearing on screen.